一月経ったなんてとても優雅で。
なのに、なんで我々はこんなとこでこそこそ覗き見なんてしてるんです。
その名も、
誰ぞいるのか。不死身アレン。
許せ。
In a world where one can transform freely between human and raven forms, there exists something called the Golden Raven ruling over them all. With this Golden Raven only appearing every few hundred years, the current prince is an anomaly. Now with him competing for the throne, he is forced to rely on a peasant boy to assist him in his succession to the throne. The story begins with a young boy running for his life in fear of the dangers to come. With him suffering from some kind of disability, he ends up dropping the boy Yukichi off a mountain. When he finally regains his senses and looks around, he finds loads of flashing lights along with a massive three-legged crow. He begs the crow for help but gets no response, leaving him only with the sight of it flying overhead. The only thing he notices is that it is a golden raven, passing out as it approaches. Within this world is the Yamauchi, a race that resides deep within the mountainous region. With this race being the three-legged crow, once its shape shifted into human forms, they took over the world. The lord of this race is called the Golden Raven, one who wields supreme power that rules over all. With the title being passed down throughout generations, the same family has always ruled. For the Golden Raven to be decided, there is a ritual called the Rite of Ascension. This ruler would hold a contest to decide his future wife, calling upon all of the most beautiful women in the world. Now in the present we watch as a girl is given the name Asebi, a lady who may one day worry the ruler. The woman speaking to her orders her to take on this name until the day she dies. Asebi accepts it reluctantly, knowing that the name given to her is not a good thing. She then stands alongside the other three women who are competing for the ruler's heart. With each girl being introduced as one of the four main house's daughters, there can only be one victor. Following these events, some of the men within the capital drink sake to discuss which girl is the finest. With the ruler not being present just yet, they talk about the girls despite them being of young age. Some of the men show more interest in the girls than others, while some act mysterious. Going back to Asebi, we see her being confronted by her sister, Princess Fujinami. The two reconnect after not seeing each other for quite some time, talking informally. As they talk, they continue walking forward with Fujinami, assuring Asebi she will catch the ruler's eyes. She tells her that she is a beauty unrivaled even by the others. One of the other girls overhears this, so she begins laughing, introducing herself as Lady Hamayu, the Southern House's daughter. She asks Asebi if she is happy to receive her name, thinking she still doesn't know what it entails. Asebi is unsure what she is talking about, so one of the other girls begins to explain it to her. With the word Asebi being written as horse intoxicating tree in Japanese, they tell her that her new name is essentially an insult. With this being said, she tells her that the ravens they command will surely dislike her new name. Hamayu continues by saying her name is calling her a brainless horse who has no thoughts of their own. She explains that not only did she insult Asebi, but she also insulted the prince who is yet to be wedded. Once Fujinami hears this, she runs off, realizing everyone is against not only her but her brother as well. Before we continue, let's take a moment to answer the question of the day. If you could transform into any animal, what would it be? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out in the next video. Now back to the recap. Once she takes her leave, the girl in red introduces herself as Mashuo, the daughter of the Western House. She tells Asebi she wants to be friends with her despite her pitiful name. She then starts calling out Hamayu, calling her an ugly wrench. They start arguing, causing Asebi to talk with the final girl, Lady Shiratama. She tells Asebi that neither of them have a chance at the prince's heart, calling them ugly. With this being said, she takes her leave, making sure to give her a dirty gaze before doing so. Upon getting back to her dress room, Asebi's attendant apologizes for not explaining her name sooner. She then begins teaching her what she needs to know in order to properly become the prince's wife. With lots to learn, she makes sure Asebi pays close attention. She informs her that years ago the mountain god first visited this land and made the area flourish. He named this land Yamauchi, the promised land, while appointing a golden raven to look over the land. Along with this, he gave the golden raven 4 children, each ruling over their respective area. This eventually founded the northern, southern, eastern, and western regions of the land, with the middle being called the royal house. The job of the four houses is to wed the prince in order to ensure he can keep this peace over the land. The only issue with this system is it causes infighting between the houses. With any child being born as male being killed except from the royal houses, there is a proxy war always going on. While they talk, Asebi is stopped by her maiden informing her she received a present from Mashuho. When she opens it up, she finds a well-made gown, hoping she will use it if she happens to win the battle. Included in this is an invitation to a tea party, making Asebi overjoyed. With her having no real friends in life, she is excited to attend this. Meanwhile, the Empress of the land plays shogi while talking about the proxy war. With the man across from her being the current emperor, it seems like she has full control over him based on his shaky appearance. After some time, the day for the tea party eventually emerges, and Asebi attends the party. Before it, however, she is presented with various dresses and fragrances, showing this marriage is a big deal. Along with Asebi being invited, the other potential candidates were also invited, making Asebi wonder what the true intention of this is. She talks with her servant but is interrupted when Mashuo asks her what perfume she wants to try. Asebi tells her that she is unsure, never having tried any perfume before. This makes the girls laugh, thinking that her house has fallen down to not even be able to afford them. Asebi doesn't care from these advances, however, whipping out some dolls to provide in exchange. Once she does this, Mashuo asks her whether she really belongs here or not. This causes her to run off in a panic, being unable to deal with all the girls ridiculing. As she cries to herself, she spots another one of girls lying on her side. She invites Asebi to sit with her, allowing Asebi to open up about her feelings. She tells her that she is trying her hardest but feels too out of place here. Once she says this, she is assured she isn't the only out of place one. Her being told the prince is also pretty weird. She tells her that the prince wasn't the first choice to succeed the title, him actually being the second son. He had an older brother 5 years older who excelled in everything but was still forsaken. The prince was for some reason declared the ruler instead of the older brother, leaving him to become a priest. This makes Asebi feel bad for the older brother, wondering why they would do such a thing. Asebi then thanks Hamayu for her time and tries to leave, but is given some words of advice before she does. She tells Asebi the prince is a true golden raven, making her wonder what this means. While this happens, the Lord of the Northern Lands finally arrives back at his house after dropping his daughter off. He is approached by some henchmen asking if he needs anything. He ignores them and continues on his way, making them call him a senile old man. Meanwhile, in another part of the Northern Lands, a fat she-male is seen talking trash to some little kids. The older of the boys, Yukiya, asks them to pay for their meals, but this only angers them more. They beat him up for some reason, leaving him within a forest knocked out cold. He wakes up to his older brother shaking him, making him wonder what the issue is. His older brother, Yukima, urges him to be more careful in what he does. He continues to act like nothing is the matter, instead asking if today is when the clan's daughters get married. They remind him that it's today, so he rushes off, transforming into a raven in the process. After this happened, he went back to his house to meet up with the others, where he is shamed. They ask him why he must always cause trouble within the area, ordering him to bow down to the fat people next time. He then takes Yukima to the Lord's house, where he apologizes for their actions. He tells them he is too busy to deal with things like this, but as he does, the older brother who should have the throne, Natsuka, emerges. He tells the senile old man that infighting is only expected, the clans never getting along. When the leader introduces this man as the previous lord, everyone is left stunned. Yukiya in particular apologizes to the others while crying, putting up a facade to the group. He tells them he accidentally bumped into a court raven earlier in the day and paid the price for it. He says it was his fault all the while, making it seem like the person who beat him was in the wrong. He then runs off to conclude this, apologizing before everyone else in front of the ones who beat him. After this happens, the man responsible for beating Yukiya is seen crying outside about his actions. The Lord of the Northern Lands, on the other hand, talks with Yukiya, asking if he is all right. He tells him there is nothing to worry about, which soon draws the attention of Natsuka. He tells Yukiya that he is courageous for showing his beaten face to the others. He then proposes that Yukiya should go with him to the capital to pay back for his actions by serving him. The others instantly agree, not being able to refuse someone like Natsuka's orders. Asebi, on the other hand, sits within her hall, awaiting the day of the ritual. She looks upon a group of cherry trees, wondering when she will meet the prince. Based on the rumors she has heard, she wonders if he will be some shameless bastard or not. These thoughts are soon voided, however, when her attendant presents her with a letter from the prince himself. With it urging her to stay in good spirits despite her name, her favour of him increases. Yukiya, on the other hand, is seen sitting around skipping out on practice. His teacher tells him that he shouldn't be in such a soul mood considering it's only every few decades there is the ritual. He tells his teacher, however, there is no way he would be happy with being sold off no matter what's going off. The teacher then thanks Yukiya for him helping out, knowing their girl won't win with her looks alone. Once he hears this, he gets ticked off, so he stands up, hoping to get some free time before he leaves. With him having a full year of palace service required, he knows this will be one of the last times he gets to truly explore the mountain. Yukima, on the other hand, emerges victorious in his battle against his opponent. After this battle, it's Yukiya's turn to step up to the plate. With his sword in hand, he stands off against the man, but gets knocked down repeatedly. This causes gossip amongst the audience, commenting on how bad he is with the sword. They also talk about how he has a different mother than he was raised by, essentially making his whole family seem schemy. Eventually, the gossip stops when Yukiya gets knocked down on his face. Following these events, he stands around waiting for his brother, but soon stops when others spot him. Instead, he decides to follow them around, lighting the man who faced off against his brother's lights. During this moment, the two of them start sparring, Yukiya hoping to learn something. As the battle goes on, he reveals that he wasn't trying at all during today's match, making a fool of his opponent, Ichiryu. Once he knocks him down, he asks why he was talking about him behind his back, showing he plans on getting some payback. He makes sure to miss the visible parts of his body, making it all hidden. As he gets beaten to a pulp, Ichiryu tries to apologize for calling out his mother, but Yukiya doesn't let this slide. He continues beating him until his anger is eventually relieved. He tells him that there is so much gossip around his family that he is tired of always hearing it. He brings Ichiryu in close and tells him that if he hears him speak of his mother again, then he will bury him. With this being said, he begins to tear up, sending in one final blow. Before he does, however, his older brother enters the room, ordering him to put his weapon down. Yukiya follows suit and puts it down, but not without giving him a talk later. As they talk, they eventually arrive back to their temple, Yukiya playing it off as if nothing happened while he was away. Later that night, he decides to visit his mother, hoping to see her before he leaves for the palace. She helps him get dressed, but he tries to stop her, reminding her he will only be gone for a year. He loves his mother, but doesn't wish to show weakness around her. Meanwhile, Shiratama gets all dressed up in preparation to meet with the prince. Once she is clothed, her old maid lady enters the room, informing her that although the prince isn't here yet, there is a new boy coming. After she hears of this, word begins to spread to the other girls as well, sparking their interest. With each of them trying their best to appease the prince, the winner of it all is still unclear. Eventually, after some time, Yukiya arrives at the capital land, riding aboard one of the ravens. Upon entering, he notices it to be rather empty, making him wonder why it is so quiet. He is then introduced to one of the main guards of the palace, who tells his teacher he is ready to take him in. With that, Yukiya is taken into the palace, never to see the others again for the next year. He is guided deep within the palace, but he finds nobody within it. This makes him ask where everybody is at, to which he informs him that they are the only two within the palace. With everybody being either killed or dismissed, Yukiya realizes this won't be some simple task. He is then guided to the prince's quarters, where he introduces Yukiya. Once the doors to the shabby house open, Yukiya realizes just how magnificent the Golden Raven really is. He tells Yukiya that he has waited for his arrival, remembering him from the time he saved him years ago. With Yukiya just arriving to the estate, the prince immediately has a task for him. He guides him to his array of pots, informing him he needs to water his plants. With the white potted plants being able to get water from the well, he thinks it will be easy, but soon learns otherwise. The prince orders him to put water from the spring into the blue pots, making him wonder what's so special about these pots. Yukiya then heads back to the estate with the prince, where he informs him he will be out for the day. Because of this, he needs him to deliver some letters for him with the utmost urgency. On top of this, he needs to refill the water jugs, all the while making sure the horses' bowls are filled. With this, he tells Yukiya that if he can't do all of this, then he needs to leave. Sumio, the guard to the prince, then presents him with a banner marking him as one of the prince's attendants. With this being said, Yukiya urges them to leave, knowing the longer they stay, the more time his tasks will take him. He starts by arranging books, then cleaning the shed where the ravens lay. He then waters all of the pots, wishing that it was easier than it actually was. Following this, he heads over to the spring to retrieve the special kind of water. Overall, it takes him 2 stops, but he ends up getting everything but delivering the letters done. Once the prince gets back, he expects to find everything done, but Yukiya informs him he is yet to deliver the letters. This ticks him off, so he sends Sumio to do it, telling Yukiya to take a break if he can't do it fast enough. Yukiya tells him that he will do it, heading to the royal court with his package in hand. At first the guards stop him for being a filthy servant, but once he shows the prince's banner, they let him in. While delivering the letters, he ends up getting many more, causing a difficult way home. He decides to read some of them, where he learns mostly letters from girls. After all of today's events, he finally takes a break, remembering one last thing that he skipped over. He remembers the prince was supposed to do some studying, so he checks the books out, but eventually forgets about it. Later that night, when the prince gets back, he tells him he has finally finished everything. With him working all day, he gets hungry, so the prince decides to throw him some extra food. With it being a tiny ball, he looks at the prince with confused eyes, but isn't able to express himself. With that, the prince heads to bed, leaving Yukiya to figure his night out. Early in the next morning, when he heads outside, he decides to meet with his teacher from the northern lands. Here, Yukiya complains about his job, telling him every day he goes to sleep aching. His teacher, Kii, tells him that he has set a record, no attendant ever lasting for more than 1 month. As they talk, Kii eventually asks him what his type in girls is, hoping to help the northern girl wed him. While they talk, they eventually get on the topic of the Golden Raven, where Kii informs him that the prince isn't just some random, him being a true Golden Raven. With most rulers being called a Golden Raven, while actually looking normally, the prince's succession is an anomaly. This explains the reason as to which he was chosen over his brother despite him being the second son. Kii tells him that when the prince was born, he immediately revealed a true Golden Raven form, making him instantly take the throne. With all of this in mind, Yukiya concludes it to be a big fight between nobles. He still doesn't believe that a Golden Raven even exists, telling him that it's just a big lie to give him the throne. Later that week, when Yukiya goes to deliver his usual letters, Natsuka, the older brother is seen watching him closely. Following these events, the Empress tells one of her attendants to put the plan in motion. Asebi, on the other hand, spends her days still waiting for the prince to emerge along with the other girls. With them only being able to wait, they constantly gossip about what they think the Parisian will end up like. Little do they know the prince is spying on them alongside Yukiya from afar. The prince says that they aren't spying on the girls, but rather checking to find the assassin after his life. Yukiya asks him how he even knows this, but the prince refuses to reveal it. One thing is for sure, he suspects the northern and eastern lands. With these two families constantly having ill intentions during the power struggle, he suspects one of them. As they talk, Yukiya accidentally bumps into a stick, alerting everyone in the surroundings somehow. With their location exposed, the prince throws him off the cliff, saving himself. Once this happens, the guards are instantly alerted, so they chase him down. Yukiya tries to run, but he is quickly subdued and put before the others. One of the guards runs up on him and slaps him as hard as she can. This pains Asebi's not wanting to see any violence, so she runs off in a hurry. Once she leaves, the other girls start fighting, with some saying Asebi is weak, while others say she is correct. This causes an argument, but it is stopped when Fujinami emerges, asking them all to be quiet. Yukiya, on the other hand, is left waiting for someone to save him, which quickly happens when Sumio arrives. He tells them he will take care of it, allowing Yukiya to leave unharmed. As he walks out, Yukiya questions Sumio as to why the prince is keeping them waiting, rather than just reveal himself. Asebi, on the contrary, meets with a messenger from the prince, apologizing for the ruckus. The girl reveals herself as Samomo, the prince's cousin, Fujinami's attendant. Meanwhile, Yukiya finally gets home until he is approached by the prince telling him they need to leave again. He is told that the royal court is calling for him to try and start something meticulous. Upon arriving at the court, the issue at hand presented is that the declaration of the prince 10 years ago was flawed. The main prosecutor explains that nobody has seen the Golden Raven, making it flawed. Once this is said, others protest this decision, calling the prince the embodiment of their teachings about the Golden Raven. With this being said, the prosecutor proposes that they rethink the heir to the throne. The prince, on the other hand, finally arrives to the court, but is stopped by Rokon, Natsuka's bodyguard. He tells him that there is no need for him to enter, their decision being made without him. The prince doesn't let this slide, however, using his powers to move him out of the way and forcibly open the door. He then walks to the front of the podium, facing off against his brother Natsuka. Before this happened, the Empress was informed that the prince had been dodging the palace. With this in mind, she knows he is aware of her plan to take him out. She reveals that the Southern House is taking the lead in decrowning the prince. Yukiya, on the other hand, looks around and sees various people, including the current emperor. While this occurs, the prince walks towards the empress and asks her why she is trying to spread lies. He tells her that he is here today to claim his throne, demanding she move her feet. As he says this, the current emperor throws a ruckus, breaking everything in front of him. He demands that the prince stand down, but he doesn't respond in the same way, talking with him gently. The prince then sits down on his throne and tells them the problem is solved. Once this happens, Natsuka protests this, claiming it's unruly to treat the emperor like that. The prince, however, has no plans of backing down, telling Natsuka that he is over his head, thinking he could become the emperor. Natsuka counters this by claiming he isn't the true Golden Raven, saying if he was, he wouldn't be doing this. The prince then asks him if he proves it all, then will he pledge allegiance. Once this is said, a man named Atsufusa stands up, claiming that Natsuka could never pledge allegiance as the true prince. Natsuka stops him after this and moves over to the prince, giving his allegiance in the process. With this being said, the prince leaves, thinking the matter is decided. After this, some protest, while others say they saw the true Golden Raven. With both sides arguing, the Northern House leader raises the question of whether the prince truly plans on taking a wife. He informs them within the next year he will make his decision, that being when he claims the throne. Yukiya then leaves the room, getting a hostile glare from Natsuka in the process. After these events, Yukiya heads to the red light district alongside the prince to enjoy their amenities. He asks what they are doing, to which the prince informs him they are celebrating his win in the court. With Yukiya still being a virgin, he is hopeless around so many beautiful girls, so he runs out, hoping to get some peace. Once he does this, the prince follows him to make sure he is all right, presenting him with 4 of the food balls in the process. This only makes Yukiya more worried about the prince, asking him how he could wander through the red light district with assassins after him. Clearly the prince doesn't care about this, however, telling him he is fine within this area. The next day, when Yukiya wakes up, he heads back to their estate, walking through the dead red light district. As he walks, he notices someone following closely behind, alerting him. They decide to play it cool, but once they arrive back at the front gate, they find a group of thugs. They demand the prince drop his sword, so he obeys, throwing it up in the air in the process. Once he does, however, Sumio emerges and slices through one of the thugs. He continues to fight, using this small opening to take out as many foes as he can. Within an instant, half of them are defeated, allowing Sumio to press them further. Because of this, the rest of the thugs run away, allowing Sumio to question one. Right before the thug answers what his intentions were, he dies from some kind of poison. With this being done, the prince can only conclude that the people were after his life. Yukiya, having never seen blood before, faints at the sight of the dead man. Later that night, he wakes up by the prince's side, apologizing for causing him such trouble. The prince, however, continues to treat him, explaining he will help him recover. As he does this, Yukiya asks him why they are after his head. This forces the prince to explain that the empress is after his head, her originally being from the southern house. With her having power within the court, she is able to do things like plan assassinations on the prince with ease. The prince explains that her original mother was from the western house, but she was killed shortly after he was born. She had been called an affair with the emperor, making the prince's life not only in danger now, but since his birth. He tells Yukiya that out of everyone in his life, the odds against him are always 999 to 1000. With this being said, he asks Yukiya to become his right-hand man, showing he has loads of trust in him. Yukiya instantly protests, asking how the soon-to-be emperor could have a peasant child as his aide. He tells him that although he has helped him out, he still doesn't see himself to be fit for the job. The prince explains that he knows he follows his orders with no ill intentions because of the flower pots. With the water from the spring killing the white pots, most people who served him tried to switch out the flowers to please him. He knows that Yukiya never did such a thing, so he trusts him deeply. After all of this is said, Yukiya still is unsure of whether he should follow the prince, seeing today's assassination attempt. As the prince continues to explain why he needs him, he starts to become more and more convinced where his loyalty is. With all of this being said, the prince asks him again whether he will serve him, causing Yukiya to eventually fold. He accepts his proposal, but under one condition: he wants to see his family again after his 1 year of service is over. Sumio then re-emerges and is ecstatic to learn that Yukiya accepted his proposal. Yukiya wonders why they are acting so close, so Sumio informs him that they have been friends since childhood. With Yukiya as an official attendant now, they act more friendly towards him. This makes Yukiya feel at ease, so he asks the prince what he will even be doing. The prince informs him that he will be protecting him and baiting out traitors against him by using robust methods. This makes Yukiya question his sanity, asking how he could use him to bait out people. Eventually he settles down, and the prince formally inducts Yukiya as his aide, thanking him for his service. He thinks everything will go well during this next year, but he is soon dragged into a foreign area. Within the red light district once again, but this time with different goals, Yukiya watches the prince gamble his money away. Although he acted confident, he ended up betting high and losing it all. Now, with him drained from all he has, they decide to try and exploit him to get the final change. The prince thinks, and with no other option, he ends up selling Yukiya off to the thugs, knowing it's better than selling himself. Following these events, Yukiya ended up going to a place called the Ravine, a place where his work is needed. Although it seems like hell, there are tons of thoughts within the ravine, making it not so bad. They talk about how he has helped them a lot for the past month, wondering if the prince left him for good. Later that day, when Yukiya goes to do his usual chores, he is stopped by the prince, informing him he is back to pick him up. They then head up a narrow path unknown to many. Eventually, after a long climb, they reach a door that requires the princess' secret combo in order to enter. Beyond this door is Sumio along with some old man who welcomes them. This tunnel is apparently the old geezer's house, and the escape route is for nobles to sneak around. Yukiya questions why they know about this, realizing it would be for corrupt nobles. Sumio tells him to shut it so they move on to the next topic. The prince tells the geezer that he will rent out the place for tonight, asking if he can collect all the most beautiful girls. Now, with this out of the way, Yukiya reveals the true intentions behind his stay at the ravine. Although it seemed like he was sold into slavery in reality, he was investigating the corruptness of the underworld. With Natsuka being deeply rooted within this area, he learned a lot to share with the others. At the head of this sketchy meeting is Rokon, Natsuka's highest level of guard. As he sits waiting for something to happen, one of the members speaks up, asking why they were all called here. He informs them that he called them all here for one reason, and one reason alone. He believes there to be an insider within his congress, so he tells them they are here to root them out. Then suddenly he calls upon one of the men and approaches him, asking why he plotted to kill the prince. As he continues explaining details, it seems more and more like he is blaming him for his failed plan. Upon hearing this Kazumichi, the man in question attempts to leave, but he is stopped immediately. Rokon continues with his lies, telling him various things that he knows he did when in reality it was all his plan. Rokon finishes by telling him that if he had been caught by someone other than him, then he would trouble Natsuka. With this in mind, he informs him that he will follow his orders or he will make sure he pays. As he stomps on him to prove his point, Natsuka's right-hand man enters the room asking what Rokon is doing. Rokon asks him why he is here, this being the head for the underworld schemers. After he asks this, Natsuka himself emerges before Rokon, taking the chair that he previously held. Natsuka questions him on what is happening, so Rokon begins spilling what happened. He says that the man he is pressing has wronged him and attempted to diminish his ideals. Rokon then asks him to trust in him and stop wasting time, to which Natsuka hesitantly agrees. Following this, Rokon whips out a long sword and asks Kazumichi once again if he really had nothing to do with this situation. Kazumichi tries to deny it, but with a sword at his head he speaks exactly as Rokon told him, showing where his loyalty is. He then asks Kazumichi if there was anything else he was up to behind his back. He points out his debts to various people, asking him if he thought he would have it paid off if he killed the prince. Kazumichi then runs in fear, showing he is guilty, and thus forcing Rokon to end his life. With a blood-stained floor and shirt, Rokon tells the others that this is what needed to be done to ensure Natsuka's future. Back in the present, Yukiya shares this with the prince along with Sumio. Once he finishes explaining it, Yukiya asks them how much power Natsuka holds despite him losing the heir to the throne. They tell him that he is mostly being controlled by others wanting him as the emperor to benefit themselves. They then ask him if there was anyone else mentioned that could have been behind the prince's life. However, with Kazumichi dead, they are unable to question him, proving it difficult to prove the empress is behind any of the attacks. Later that night, when they finish talking, Yukiya tries to hit the hay but is stopped by the prince. He thanks him for his investigations within the area and informs him that they were begging for him to stay. The thugs said Yukiya was such a good worker they would actually pay the prince, but obviously he refused. Upon hearing this, Yukiya gets angry rather than happy, telling the prince that he really did sell him off. Later that week, we see the various girls still competing to try and win over the prince. Little do they know the prince is out sleazing around, causing all of these girls to just sit around waiting. One of the girls asks her attendant if the prince has written to her back yet, but sadly he hasn't. Another one of the girls, Asebi, is seen sewing a blanket with hopes of giving it to the prince. As she works on it, her attendant tells her that she will go get more materials. While she is out, Asebi gets a visitor, it being one of her close friends coming to check up on her. Asebi tells her that although it's fun being here and living lavishly, she still feels out of place. As she says this, her friend assures her that she is doing good and that she is the most beautiful of them all. She then presents a large musical instrument, telling her that another one of their friends asked to give her this. With various details on the string instrument, Asebi wastes no time giving it a shot. Somehow, despite her never playing before, she is able to play a soothing melody, bringing many to listen. Eventually, after some time playing it, she remembers a past memory where she witnessed the prince as a youngin'. As if it was love at first sight, she was enticed by this man, only to learn years later that it was actually the prince. Now she is back in the palace, hoping to win over her first love in a battle against the others. Meanwhile, the prince is seen sitting around per usual until he gets a letter. It entails a large sum of cash in exchange for him agreeing to meet with some of the girls. Apparently, because he is taking so long to make any moves, the emperor himself sent this letter to try and get him to make a decision already.